Morning, Donnie.
Ready to roll, Paterson?
Yeah. Everything okay?
This cinematography is unique. It signifies normality, yet it isn't boring, and paired with the poems on screen throughout, it keeps you engaged from the first minute. Paterson is a bit of a lesser known film, but it's found its way into my favourites of all time. Jim Jarmusch isn't a new director, but to me he's probably the most interesting, and I don't think there's a genre that he hasn't tried out yet. In today's video I'll be looking at how he and Frederick Elms made his cinematography poetic in Paterson. First I'll go through what equipment they used, then look at what techniques they used to create the poetic atmosphere, and finally their pre-production process. Elms shot Paterson on the Arri Alexa Mini and Studio, paired with Zeiss's variable prime lenses. The Mini is a perfect camera for smaller productions due to it having an incredible sensor yet being more affordable for the film. It's also a great handheld camera due to its smaller form factor in comparison to the Studio. When it comes to the lenses however, the Zeiss variable primes, otherwise known as Vari primes, aren't nearly as popular as they should be. They offer incredible sharpness and contrast as well as being completely free from distortion and vignetting, even when wide open. However, due to their capability to zoom, they are on the heavier side of cinema glass. Elms opted for the Vari primes as they enabled him to change the focal length during the take, as well as having the advantage of not needing to shut down set for 5 minutes every time they needed to change lenses. I expressed to Jim that rather than having the exact same shot for each scenario, that we capture a very subtle variety of shots around Paterson to slowly develop and build an engaging picture of his poetic character. So what is poetic cinematography? Because on the surface it doesn't really mean much, but to me it means for it to flow. Whether you use colour, composition, movement, lighting, it doesn't matter as long as you allow it to flow. But to talk about the lighting for a second, Elms wanted to use as much natural light as possible, or at least inspired, which in basic terms means to amplify the natural light or to make it look as though it was shot in natural light. The downside of always using natural light though is that a lot of the time your scenes tend to blow out, especially when you are shooting exteriors. We kept the actors out of the sun and were ultra careful about the times of day we shot each scene, making sure to keep the colour and contrast the same. In a way, the simplicity of the cinematography is what makes it so poetic. Elms isn't trying to complicate things, and that's because he doesn't need to. Less is more, and no matter how cliche it is to say that, it's the truth. You see it in many other films shot by extraordinary cinematographers. They don't try to overcrowd the frame with useless items. When it came to post-production though, Elms held back on the grading since he wanted to retain the natural look that he had shot on set. Slightly desaturating the image and lowering the contrast presented a subtle visual support to the repetition of Paterson's life, a life that's worth living. Pre-production on a Jarmusch picture takes time, and in the case of Paterson it was about 4 weeks, spread over several months. But in this time the production crew were able to rig out the house in order to allow Elms to control the lighting regardless of the time of day. Elms also went to Paterson in this time, and took pictures on the buses just to get a sense of all of the little details of the city. Afterwards, he also put together a sequence of photos for Jim Jarmusch to use as blueprints for the montages. During pre-production, I took a bus ride through Paterson and shot footage of everyday elements: an empty seat, reflections, the glint of sunlight on an opening door, passing vehicles, telephone wires, industrial brickwork, the silvery edges of clouds, and edited this into a short reel for Jim to consider. It met his thinking head on. Paterson is not a treatise on existentialism. It's really not as highfalutin as that, just a simple poetic story. For Jim, it's often more about the bit in between the dramatic moments. Ultimately, Paterson is one of the most visually unique films of the past decade. The use of natural light in order to capture the character's feelings is just magnificent, and the way in which Elms used his lens choice to determine a character choice for Paterson was astonishing. In a film as simple but beautiful as this, there isn't much to say, but I've been wanting to break down the cinematography for ages, and I'm so glad I finally got the opportunity. If you have a film or show that you would like to see me break down, leave a comment down below. If you found this video helpful, a thumbs up is appreciated, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, then hit the subscribe button. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.
Poetic Cinematography.